Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about Mark 10:27, and that reads, "And Jesus looking upon them saith, With men it is impossible, but not with God, for with God all things are possible." In this show, we will discuss the difference between thinking and knowing, matter and spirit, sowing to the flesh and sowing to the spirit. Listen as we explain avidya, ignorance, which is when the unreal, impermanent, is mistaken for the real, permanent. What we believe affects how we think, which determines our sense of life, be it material and impossible or spiritual and possible. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and experience possibilities. Swami, today's title of the show is With Men, It Is Impossible. Can you explain that a little bit further for us?
Well, I think what we're talking about here is just what we're saying in the Bible, that there's a difference between material values and beliefs, which we would call being with men, and spiritual values and beliefs, which we would call being with God. And to really start to understand what this looks like when you're actually doing it, when you're living out from not just a belief in a spiritual power, but an understanding of a divine law or a principle that can be employed and called upon as a reliable resource while we're experiencing this human life that we call.
Well, in the beginning of the verse, it says, with men it is impossible. So what do you think he's talking about when he says it? What is it? What is impossible?
Yeah, he's talking about all things, because all things with God are possible. What we really have to understand is what is the difference between these two on an experiential level. What does it look like when I have accepted myself to be a finite mortal being, as opposed to I have accepted myself as being the image and likeness of an indestructible, eternal, spiritual being. And what we're learning is that it really comes down to choice and understanding rather than just a belief.
So the saying, with God, all things are possible, somebody might read that and take the phrase all things to mean material things, but I don't think that's what we are talking about here at all in this verse.
Right, because the more that we drill down with this divine science, the more you start to understand the difference between material beliefs and spiritual beliefs. The difference, like we said in the opening, the difference between thinking and knowing, because material beliefs are rooted in duality. It gets all its information from a divided consciousness, whereas spirit requires us to return to the unified state. So we're out of duality and we're in this absolute truth of being. And everything changes at that point. But we must be born again into spirit. We find ourselves in this false sense of existence that has an expiration date. We're in time, we're in space, and we're expiring. Now, in order for us to break that, we have to be reborn in spirit. And you can't just do that academically. You actually have to accept yourself to be spirit. You need to know yourself in the way that you're created, which is as spirit, which is whole, it's complete, it's fulfilled, it's unchanging. And from that level of understanding, we start to see what we were calling life before as just a thought about what is real. And so thought becomes an important stepping stone. Our mortal mind works on corporeal sense, which just recognizes duality, which is a thought about the divine idea, which is the truth of being. And as long as we believe what is reporting in our 5 corporeal senses is real, then we're kind of in this trap. We're hypnotized. And we're in the cycle of death and rebirth, and it's ever-ending, never-ending. Now, for us to get out of that, the key question here is not only how to do it, but why would I want to? Why would I want to know that I am an eternal spiritual being? Why would I want to experience the benefits of an unchanging, eternal, blissful existence? If you have that as your goal, which is the goal of Kriya Yoga, which is the goal of any spiritual science, then we're starting to learn that there are things that we can do. Like we had said, you have to be born again. And what does that look like when I separate my belief that I am a finite mortal creature into a complete understanding that I am an eternal spiritual being?
Is that what you mean when you say the word divided consciousness?
Yeah, the divided consciousness is corporeal sense level. It's duality, which is just a thought about divine creation, which is whole, it's complete, it's fulfilled. It doesn't report in our 5 sense mind.
So am I right in thinking that we are as humans born automatically with this divided consciousness, and what you're saying, we have to be born again to have this one mind that you speak of?
Well, to the best of my understanding, the way that it actually works is that we need to awaken from the belief that we are a finite mortal creature, that is a false sense of existence. In truth, we are already at one with this divine principle, but we're unconscious to that. And as long as we're unconscious to that, we're in this cycle of death and rebirth because we're accepting a reality that does not have the divine qualities. But once we put off the old man, the false sense of who we are, and we accept that we are an eternal spiritual being, we graduate from material law to spiritual law. We graduate from the law of karma into this divine law of absolute life.
And that's what you mean in our summary when we said sowing to the flesh and sowing to the spirit.
Right. See, divine science is not what we think about God, but what God knows about us as God's idea. So this shifting from material, mortal, from thinking to knowing is very specific, and the mortal mind cannot bring forth the divine image. Therefore, we must make, I like what it says in the Bible, thine eye single, or repent, think differently. But something must be done to prove divine presence. This is making a transition from the human sense of life, to which we look to others for our good, to the spiritual life in which we look within ourselves. And then we let God's grace flow out from us. That would be how Joel Goldsmith would say that.
What you just said about that quote from Joel Goldsmith, when he says we look to others for our good, I think that's what we're inundated with in this human life, in our five senses, from all Christmas movies or whatever. Everybody's looking to be good to someone. And I think that's part of the trap. Would you agree with that?
Right. We have this separated sense of self. We believe in the many. We think there are persons, places, and things that are external to us. We have this objective sense of self. From that limited sense of who we think we are, like you said, we react. We're either trying to get things for ourselves, or we're trying to become something, or we're trying to help somebody to accomplish something. All of this is really the false sense of existence. In truth, life is perfect. The divine creation, which is right here, right now, which is spiritual, entirely whole, complete, it's only one. As we start to understand ourselves to be the reflection of that divine life, that one divine mind, then we start to see how that has such a profound effect on what we were perceiving before on a corporeal sense level.
You had said the phrase earlier, make thy eye single, and that actually comes from the book of Luke 11:34, and the verse reads as follows: "The light of the body is the eye. Therefore, when thine eye is single, thy whole body also is full of light. But when thine eye is evil, thy body also is full of darkness." I'm kind of hoping we can probably break that down a little bit for our readers.
Yeah, basically what he's saying here is that if we sow to the flesh, which is what they call evil, it's very interesting because we think evil is something that is bad, but evil is anything that is not of the divine creation. Evil was also an archery term because sin is an archery term, meaning missing the mark, and evil is anything that isn't the mark. So however you want to use those terms, what they're referring to is our corporeal senses. And the concept of being full of darkness means that you are unconscious to your divine inheritance. You're unconscious to this divine creation, which is right here, right now, that doesn't report in our five corporeal senses. And so a big part of this concept of being born again really means to graduate from material or corporeal sense level of living to a spiritual sense of living. Because the Word of God, which is pouring out right here, right now, isn't interpreted by our two eyes or our two ears. But if we make our eye single, it really means that we are seeing with our soul. We're seeing things on a spiritual level. And when we do that, the body is full of light. As opposed to when we are sowing to the flesh, the body is full of darkness. And when you're full of darkness, you have accepted that you're going to die. Whereas if you figure out that you are an eternal spiritual being, you are the reflection of an indestructible principle, then you're full of light, which means that you have eternal life.
Well, we're going to pause right here to hear words from our sponsor, so listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, just one more curiosity I have about that Luke verse 11:34. We talked about the whole body also is full of light versus the body full of darkness. And I think we need to talk a little bit about what we mean by light and what we mean by darkness.
Yeah, I think these are metaphors that they use as far as to try and understand the difference between matter and spirit. Or another way of looking at it is truth and ignorance. That if we know this truth that they speak about in the Bible, and the truth is that there is but one life. There's only one God. There's only one truth. And if we know that, we are free, which means that we're free from this cycle of death and rebirth. We're free from what they called darkness, the false sense of existence that most of us are accepting as what we're calling life now.
Well, it is interesting that throughout the Bible, it does caution us not to be of this material world. And as a matter of fact, there is a verse from Romans 12:2 in the King James Version, and that reads, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Let's talk about that for a little bit and break that down for our readers.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about. We must forsake our modes of mortal thinking. That's what I think they mean by transform by the renewing of your mind. And then, of course, I really like what they say here, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. That it's one thing to say that I believe in God, but it's a completely different experience when you're able to demonstrate this goodness that they're talking about. And this is what the message of the Christ was, to heal the sick, reform sinner, raise the dead. And for those that have this as a reality, those that have brought themselves to this level of identity, then of course they're under the government of this divine law. But you really have to prove it rather than just talk about it or say or wish that you knew it. And it's a very interesting dynamic because we can't do it with this mortal mind, that we really have to renew what we were calling before thinking. And graduating from your human corporeal sense level of thinking to thinking with divine mind is what they're talking about. Moving from the rational to the absolute, moving from material to spiritual understanding.
So I think what you're saying is we can't have it both ways. We can't think with a mortal mind and then think that we're also of divine mind. And I believe the Bible calls that being double-minded.
Well, double-minded is the mortal mind. In, say, for example, in James 1:8, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And then there's another James 2:20, but wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead. And then again in James 2:26, for as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. What we're talking about here, double-mindedness, we're living from that personal sense of being. We see the many. We're working with the changing conditions of our personal mentality, forming thoughts and opinions based on the testimony of our five senses, which is only giving us human conjecture. It's not the truth of being. And the only way that we will be able to perceive the truth was what they called with the Christ. The Christ is what makes the divine creation intelligible to the human consciousness. But that spiritual sense, once we have graduated, once we know the truth, that the truth will dispel the error, just like light dispels darkness. And what we're also learning is that darkness isn't an opposing power to light. It's just the absence of light. So we're approaching our lives ignorant of this divine creative principle. And how do we know is because we're not proving it. We're not demonstrating the presence of this divine law. And so as a result, we're kind of locked into this false sense of existence, but we're in the trap, under the cycle of death and rebirth, and under the government of the law of karma. What we're putting out is what we get back. But it's an ongoing, ever-ending, never-ending cycle until we are born again of the Spirit, water and the Spirit. And by us knowing ourselves in the way that we're created and having cultivated spiritual sense, now we're able to perceive things very differently.
Well, in the book of James, a little bit further on, he gives us further instruction, and this is James 4:8. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. So again, I think he's telling us, if we're of this divine mind, that would bring God to us. But what do you think he means when he says cleanse your hands? Because I'm sure that probably means something other than what we would assume it means. And then purify your hearts. Can you give us some clues on that?
Basically what he's saying here, cleanse your hands. The hands are a Mercury image. And Mercury in astrology is the symbol for the lower mind. And then, of course, as you graduate and purify your hearts, you're at the mid-mind. The concept of purifying means that we must purge ourselves of things on a physical level that keep us attached to this false sense of existence. The belief, fear, like we talked about, is a defense mechanism for the false sense. Instinct, appetite, preservation, survival, these are all forces that we have to overcome. And then on a mental level, we have to purify ourselves of all of these human beliefs and concepts and theories that we've been socialized with, because they're all based on human conjecture. They're not working with the truth of being. And so you're working with half principles, half laws that really have no spiritual unction. They don't have the power of the truth. And you can't do it if you're double-minded. That you have to graduate to spiritual understanding. You have to graduate to divine mind. The mind of God knows no iniquity. It doesn't know sin, sickness, suffering, or death because God didn't create any of those things. That's just part of Genesis 2, which is this secondary creation, this man-made world of thought that we have to come out of.
So when Jesus did these healings in the Bible, these people did have these physical conditions. So did Jesus not see that they actually were these conditions? He saw through that with thine eye being single?
I really like what Mary Baker Eddy says on page 476 in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Jesus beheld in science the perfect man, who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appeared to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness, and this correct view of man healed the sick. What we're calling reality is observation dependent, and it is the observer that sets the measurement for what's called the collapse of the wave function. And so Jesus, thinking with divine mind, as opposed to most of us thinking with a 5-sense corporeal mind and belief, he's got a very different image that outpictures a completely different experience that we call healing.
So it's not by using any like mental energy or anything like that. This is a completely different, out of scope for us to really comprehend, because we're not of this divine mind as a whole.
Right. He's working with spiritual understanding, because one of the things that we start to learn is that mental energy cannot bring forth the divine idea. The physical body is a mental image, and the more divinely mental we understand ourselves to be, the more harmonious and indestructible the image appears. In fact, in the Kriya Yoga that we do, in the performance of movements such as salutation to the moon and salutation to the sun, we're attuning our mind-body complex to the divine idea in order to gain the spiritual understanding behind the physical appearance. So we're reverse engineering it. The divine idea is perfect. The divine creation, which is right here, right now, but isn't reporting in our corporeal senses, but we're also recognizing that the physical body, which is reporting in our corporeal senses, is our thought about the divine idea. If you can look at your physical body and you can see lack, limitation, if you have pain, discomfort, instability, then you know you're not thinking right. You have a belief in something other than the perfection of being.
That should be like our first move. We notice we have a lack of money, let's say. So that should clue us in right then and there that we are of this material world and not of this divine world.
Right. And if you can turn to God or the divine idea, however you want to term that, then all things are possible. But if you continue to try and do this as a man or a human, then of course you're under the law of karma. It doesn't have the scientific certainty that the divine idea has, because spirit is law, spirit is principle. It's the only self-existent power in this universe.
As you were speaking, it reminded me of that phrase that I've heard people say before, money is their God. I think some of these people really think that God with a big G as opposed to with a little g. And that is what's going to bring down this failure force. Is that what you're saying? Because now we're sowing to the flesh if money is our God.
Right. And you're in the trap. You're in the cycle of death and rebirth. And until you at some point decide that what you're doing isn't working for you and you have that will, then you're going to need leadership. You're going to need instruction in how to separate from your belief in matter and rejoin to the divine idea.
Well, we do have to break down the show for today, so listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. Once you're on the homepage, you see the fading banner and it comes up with Blog Talk Radio Show. Just click that. That directs you to the Blog Talk Radio Show catalog page. And also by clicking the products tab, then online classes, that will direct you to all the classes that Swami has available for you. So Swami, with that, do you have any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and experience possibilities. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.